Hello, my name is Monsignor Richard Henning. I'm a professor of biblical theology at the Seminary of the Immaculate Conception in Huntington, New York. And I'd like to welcome you to this course in the Passion Narratives. Our first task today is to begin asking the question, why Passion Narratives? Why should we separate out these parts of the four Gospels and look at them in context and in detail, as well as compare and contrast them among each other? Haven't you, in a sense, already covered this material in courses like the Synoptic Gospels or Johannine literature? So why should we do this task? And he said to them, O foolish men, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. This quote is taken from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 25 to 27. It comes from the story of the road to Emmaus, where Jesus teaches those he encounters on the road about the nature of his destiny to suffer and die for the salvation of the world. The suffering and the death of Jesus has ever been at the center of Christian proclamation. It stands at the heart of how we understand Jesus' own identity, as well as how we understand the nature of the human person and even the mystery of salvation. But even those who first experienced these events, we see, had great difficulty in understanding what was happening. Their response was more fear than awe, and more the desire to run away than the desire to understand. I think it's fair to say that even in our own world, the cross remains a stumbling block for people of faith and people who don't have faith. How are we to understand what God has done in these mysteries of the suffering and passion of our Lord Jesus Christ? It's a key question, and our time will be well spent as we look at the content of the Passion Narratives and experience the face of the suffering Christ as it has been depicted for us by the four Gospel writers. In this course, our task will be to examine one particular part of each of the four Gospels, that is the Passion Narrative. Of course, we'll look at this part of the Gospel in its overall context, and by doing this, will begin to understand something of the theology and the proclamation, the portrait of Jesus that emerges from that Gospel. In fact, many scholars believe that the Passion Narratives emerge from earlier sources. They suggest, in fact, that the Passion Narratives are the earliest written part of the Gospels, so that these narratives themselves have influenced the shaping of the rest of each Gospel. So as we look at this one part of the Gospel, we will certainly be beginning to understand something of the character of the whole Gospel. We'll also compare and contrast among the Gospels, looking for the content of that early Christian witness to the events of Jesus' suffering and death. But as we begin to do this, we want to think about these words, Passion Narratives. The narratives is a word that we'll look at next, namely that these are stories, but we'll look at the consequences of that later. For now, our question is, what do we mean by this word passion? Why are these parts of the Gospel called Passion Narratives, and what is the significance of it? Passion, in English anyway, means to suffer, to endure, or to bear. It derives from the Latin word patior. This meaning is fairly obvious to us when we think about the suffering and the death of Jesus as the Gospels relate it. So when we speak of Christ's passion, we're using that as shorthand to refer to the suffering and death that he endures. But passion has other connotations in English. It can also mean intense emotion. It can mean deep feeling. It can even be used to speak of someone's great commitment to something. So, for example, you'll hear people use the phrase that they do things with a passion. In our context, these two areas of meaning come together in understanding the word passion as it is applied to the suffering and death of Jesus. So, on the one hand, Jesus of Nazareth was condemned to die. The cross was imposed upon him. In this sense, he was a victim of suffering and death, just as is every human being. But then there is that other side of the passion present in Jesus' life and ministry. The crucifixion, after all, as the Gospels reveal to us, was no surprise. They make it clear that hostility against Jesus was the result of Jesus' own mission, his preaching and his activity of healing and liberating people from sin and demonic possession. Because of his unyielding commitment, his passion for his ministry, Jesus found himself, in some sense put himself, on a collision course with certain powerful forces. From this perspective, Jesus' death is therefore the outcome of his life. He chooses death. In the language of the gospel, he took up his cross.